Farmer bailouts. As a small farmer, here are some things I think the public should know about them. Farmers that ask for bailouts will usually tell you three things. One, we feed you, so really you owe it to us. Two, they need your help because they're poor. And three, they need your help because agriculture is so hard. In fact, it's kind of hopeless. It's definitely not because some financial decisions were made that are not panning out. Let's unpack those three things that they will tell you. First off, we feed you. The main reason, not the only reason, but the main reason that US farmers are asking for help right now is trade wars. They're used to selling a lot of soy, corn, tobacco, and other products abroad, mostly to China. But now they can't because trade wars. Now, if a farmer is losing a lot of money because of a trade war, they weren't feeding you. They were selling goods abroad. There's good odds they don't even want to try and feed you because raising cheap bulk exports to China is, I wouldn't say easy, but it's fairly simple as farming goes. Growing food for domestic consumption is a lot more work. So a lot of people in agriculture, frankly, don't even want to try and feed Americans. That's why they're asking for bailouts instead of just changing what they grow to feed Americans. To do that, they'd have to grow a lot more fruits and veggies, and they don't want to do that. Now, growing food for export is a perfectly fine thing to do. But don't build your farm around exports and then turn around and tell the US taxpayer, hey, you owe me because I feed you. Two, you will be told that farmers need help because they're so poor. We all grew up hearing about how poor, struggling small family farms are getting pushed out of agriculture. And yeah, that's very real. And yes, the average family farm does lose money every single year. Both of those things are 100% true. Now, after we've just had decades of pushing poor white, black, brown, tenant, and sharecropping farmers out of agriculture, let's stop for a second and ask ourselves, who's left? It's overwhelmingly families with enough financial ballast and multi-generational wealth to survive bad years. It's people who can afford to lose money. Think about who can afford to do a thing that keeps losing money. It's not poor people. We do have data on farmers' wealth and income here in the US, and it will rock your world. And I put a link in the comments or description because you deserve to see this for yourself. The truth is, family farmers in the US actually tend to make more money than non-farmers in America. Yes, after you take out farm debts and expenses. And that's not new. It's been like that every single year since 1998. At this point, most small family farms in the United States are also millionaires. Now, being a millionaire is not what it used to be. And I've been very happy to work with some families who do have big multi-million-dollar estates and do a good job with it. I actually made a whole video that goes into a couple of those farms and why they're cool. Link in the description and or comments. People who have a lot of resources can work very hard and do great things, and I love to see it. And I think a lot of what made those folks successful was they acknowledged that they had a lot of resources and that responsibility comes with that, and they took it seriously. That's just one reason it's really important to understand what's really going on wealth-wise in agriculture. The median small family farmer in America is right at the top 10% of Americans for wealth, believe it or not. And it's been like that for a while. So when people say, oh, bailouts only go to millionaire farmers, I do get a little chuckle out of that because that's most farmers. Most farmers are millionaires. You'd actually have to put in a little legwork to find the ones of us who are not. Now, people can get really upset when I point out what's going on with farmers financially, but it is the truth. And as a small family farmer who is not a millionaire, because I am merely entry-level middle class, knowing that most of my peers are in a completely different financial world from me is actually really helpful. It puts things in perspective. Unfortunately, it's also really common for Americans who are pretty wealthy to not realize that they're wealthy. They hang out with other people like themselves, so they think their life is normal. That's why rich people in America often self-identify as middle class. So the farm sector is still mostly in denial about the wealth level that most farmers in the US today are working with. But that doesn't mean you have to be. Just know that when farmers ask for bailouts, even when it's a normal year where they didn't start a trade war, that's still people who are mostly in the top 10% of wealth in America asking the bottom 90% for money. It's unseemly. 3, to cap it all off, the public is always getting told how hopeless agriculture is. And yeah, it's hard work, but hopeless it is not. After 27 years in the industry, I'm still pretty close to the bottom of farmers in wealth just because I didn't inherit land and I've had to build everything myself from scratch. That's a rarity in American agriculture today. Most people in farming today were born into some property. So I've got every excuse to be a pessimist on agriculture, and I'm not. Here's why. I've worked with hundreds of family farms, and a lot of them were real doomers. You know the drill. I don't know how I'm going to stay in the game. Nobody wants to work anymore. The world is falling apart. But I also worked with a lot of family farms whose biggest problem was, I don't know how we're going to keep up with demand. People really, really want what I'm growing, and the prices they're willing to pay work out just fine for me. My biggest problem is how do I grow enough to give the people what they want? I know what kind of problems I want to have, right? I will take the second kind, thank you. The biggest divide between the optimists and the doomers wasn't really money, because farmers across the board tend to be fairly high net worth individuals. It wasn't whether or not their day job paid a lot of money, it was what they chose to grow. People who chose to grow things that are in demand, even when it's hard, that take more investment and work up front, tend to get good results financially, are able to build a proper livelihood. The farmers I worked with who believe that farming is hopeless. Some were small farmers without a lot of resources, but a lot of them were surprisingly large with a lot of finances to back them up, and they were still feeling hopeless about things. Some have high-paying jobs, some don't. The one thing that unites them, all those pessimists, is what they choose to grow. One thing that really unites the pessimists in agriculture is they just grow whatever the baseline crop is to grow. Could be corn, soybeans, hay, whatever in their area. They tend to grow it in the simplest way, not using cover crops, not using IPM that tends to save money in the long run. And now let me be clear, simple is relative because nothing in agriculture is easy. But there's a baseline of hard and then some things that are even harder. All that said, the pessimists in agriculture, in my experience, tend to be the people who gravitate towards the baseline, most simple crops, even when the price is bad. Even when we're having a trade war and the market for it is gone, they will keep growing the same baseline, most simple crops just because they're simple. No matter what happens, every year they keep growing the baseline over and over again and complaining that they keep getting the same result. And that is wild behavior to see because there is really so much opportunity out there. And farmers can have a lot more control over our finances than a lot of us seem to realize. Agriculture is not doomed, and you would think people in my sector, other farmers, would be excited to hear that. A lot of my peers really don't like when people talk about the opportunity out there because they'd rather believe it's hopeless. Because if there's hope, then they'd be responsible for living up to it. And they especially want everyone else around them to think farming is hopeless too. Because if everyone else believes farming is hopeless, then it's really easy to do the bare minimum on your farm, get bad results, blame everybody but yourself, and go begging for handouts. It's just easier to spin a story of doom and gloom and demand bailouts than it is to live up to your potential. And I want to be clear, absolutely, we need safety nets, but trade war bailouts for farmers, a group of people who are mostly millionaires, and voted in their own problems? That's not a safety net. That's just the rich sticking up the poor. So I'm one of the poorer farmers still working in the United States today, and I'm here to tell you the trade war bailouts that a lot of my peers are asking for are a mess for a whole host of reasons. And I'd really like my sector to think very carefully about what we do and what we ask for. Backlash is real. I gotta get back to work. I hope everybody gets what they worked for.